Hello everyone, and welcome to my first real video of, well, quote-unquote gameplay from Task Force Admiral. The developer, Drydock Dream Games, was kind enough to provide some of the early supporters and content creators with an early access version of this game. And I say early because, well, it's a very early version of the game. So we finally have a small slice of the game to play around with. Now, for those who don't know, Task Force Admiral Volume 1 is an upcoming naval warfare simulation slash war game that puts the player in command of an American carrier task force in the Pacific in 1942. With a specific focus on historical realism, Task Force Admiral aims to recreate the carrier task force operations of that period, with the player taking the role of a flag officer, that is, an admiral, and making operational decisions that could affect the course of the game. Since I'm an amateur naval historian, specifically focused on the Pacific War, well, this game is clearly right up my alley and one that I've been highly anticipating for some time now, and I'm certainly not alone in that anticipation. So here we are. Now bear in mind, this is not a fully playable demo. In other words, I cannot control any units or aircraft or anything in this. The only thing I do have control over here is the camera and the menus. Now annoyingly, there's no volume control in this demo, so I've really had to crank down the sound in post-production. Otherwise, when we go and watch the aircraft flying, just the roar of the engines is just overpowering. Now this scenario takes place on the 15th of May 1942, but it is not based on any particular historical battle. So we have Task Force 16 here, the Enterprise and the Hornet, and we're facing off against a small Japanese carrier force, which is the Shokaku and Zuikaku. We're just here off the Santa Cruz Islands, and both have strikes inbound en route towards each other. This is largely just a test of the game's assets. The player is participating here as a spectator, and all of the planned strikes and combat air patrols are already set up and scheduled. So again, all we can really do is just use the camera and watch. We get a nice look at a lot of the volumetric clouds here. You can hear the aircraft nearby. I'm just trying to find them. Go up here to the tactical view or the tactical map. Now we play Spot the Dot. Find all the aircraft that are roaring around the sky here. Now this scenario is limited to 30 minutes of battle time, basically from 0830 to 0900. There we go, we got some Dauntless dive bombers, as well as some, I believe, Avenger torpedo bombers. Or not Avengers, I think Devastators. Old torpedo bombers. Now that 30 minutes of game time is enough for both the US and the Japanese strikes to reach and attack their targets, and then the game just sort of abruptly pauses once it's over. So for this reason, I've actually decided to play this scenario twice, and you're going to see, once in this first one, we're going to follow the US strike on the Japanese, and then basically I just played the scenario again and I recorded that, and in that one we're going to follow the Japanese strike on the US carriers later on in the video. Now, of course, you can play the strike multiple times, and let's just get a quick look here of some of the islands, the foliage. So again, this game models a good chunk of the southern Pacific. Again, not the entire Pacific, but you can go to the map and see these various places. Use the order of battle menu there and click on individual ships, and you'll automatically snap the camera to those. And you can see this is the Shokaku. She's gonna bring some aircraft up from the hangar, lining them up for a combat air patrol, I believe. Those are Zeros. Anyway, like I said, so in this first part we're gonna follow the US strike, and in the next part we'll follow the Japanese strike. Now we can play this multiple times, but the broad course of the events will be the same. In other words, like, they're not going to go and do something crazy. But that being said, you'll get different results each time. And to me, that shows good programming, at least from a probabilistic standpoint. When you can play a sequence of a game over and over and obtain different results every time. So sometimes the aircraft are very successful. They really just hammer their targets with bombs and torpedoes. Other times they do okay, you know. You hit some, miss some, and other times they're just totally unsuccessful. So again, it's good. It's not like the whole game is obviously not like scripted down to a T. So maybe these torpedo bombers or the dive bombers are going to do really, really well this time, or maybe they'll do okay, or maybe they just won't. Now, a couple points I really want to emphasize here is that this is very much a work in progress, okay? Let me say that again. Work in progress, okay? Many things that you see here are subject to change. I think basically they have the general world elements down right now. So you're not going to see like drastic changes with those things, but like damage models, unit collision, the strategic AI routines and all that, those are not quite fully implemented. And furthermore, a lot of the menus in this slice of the game are still incomplete. That being said, they literally, just a couple days ago at the time I'm recording this, they patched the game, so to speak, and they added in like oil slicks and the damage modeling for the ships and stuff. So you will see that. You see that guy just went down. So again, you know, weird kind of graphical things like that. You know, when the aircraft gets shot down, then the air crew, the pilots and the gunners and all that, they just sort of magically disappear. And yeah, but they do plan to eventually add in, you know, the crew bailing out and parachuting down. Another thing is that there's no command interface, there's no music, there's no voice acting here, and they have incomplete sound effects for this part of the game. As well as certain aircraft animations like the engines starting up, the landing gear retracting or going down, or aircraft crashes and things like that. Those are not fully implemented. Now, one interesting thing is that the developers eventually envision like implementing things like aircraft takeoff and landing mishaps, you know, to reflect the real dangers of actual carrier flight operations. You know, not everyone has a successful takeoff, not everyone has a successful landing. Now, the developer Drydock Dream Games is a tiny, tiny team, and it's basically 4 people. This entire game has literally been coded by a single guy working full-time on it. His name is Jean-Baptiste. So the guy's pretty much a wizard, you know. Now, the game's producer, Admiral, basically works on all the marketing and stuff and making sure, you know, leads the team. Then you have the illustrator, which is Julien, and the 3D artist, you know, is Rizky, I believe his name is. So yeah, it's literally those 4 people. Jean-Baptiste, Admiral, Julien, and Rizky working on this game. And what they have accomplished thus far is, I must say, extremely impressive. So they have put a tremendous amount of hard work into this game, and specifically what I really like is they are heavily focused on realism, historical realism. Now, this is not a flight simulator, okay? This is not DCS, it's not IL-2 Sturmovik, you know, and at the same time, this is not like a warship simulation, so to speak. It's not Silent Hunter, right? Not really a submarine simulator. It's not totally arcade-ish either. This isn't Battle Stations, although they plan to implement a good amount of configurability to the game options. So you can have like pretty good, you know, knowledge of what's going on throughout the game, throughout the battle space. So you can play it in a way sort of like Battle Stations, but you're not going to be able to control the individual units. I can talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Now, there is an active pause feature on this game, as well as, you know, a time compression. So you'll see me using those at various times. So if the units just all of a sudden speed up or pause like you see right now, you know, you hear the aircraft engine, but they're not moving. That's not a glitch or the game stuttering or anything. I'm pausing it so I can switch the camera to focus on specific units like aircraft. Just trying to click on tiny little aircraft that are moving so I can focus the camera on them is really hard. So I'm actively using pause. So that's what that is, in case you're wondering. I will also emphasize that I am not a video game developer or a programmer in any sense of that term. But I have developed some pen and paper war games, and I have studied kind of the history of war games, and I've applied the use of war games to the educational field as well, in the classroom and so on. So I kind of have some knowledge of game development and what those types of things entail, you know, at least from a pen and paper board game kind of perspective, but I'm not a programmer. With that being said, I am going to try and approach this from a design perspective and look at how the game is implementing the historical events and tactics into the game's mechanics. However, since this is still very early in the game's development, I'm going to be withholding any discussion about actual historical events and weapons and aircraft and ships until later on when we have a more fully playable slice. And I swear to God, even though there's no real voice acting, when you zoom in and hear the anti-aircraft guns firing, I swear I am hearing, like, shouts of men. Like just screams or something. And I do not think it's my imagination. Alright, we got the... Is that the Shokaku? It's hard to tell, but anyway, she's got some torpedoes dropped on her. And you can see the Japanese, they wildly maneuver to avoid torpedoes. The scale of this game that they have made, first of all, looks very realistic, and it is really impressive. We got these torpedo bombers. They're going in on, I'm guessing, the other carrier. I get the Shokaku and the Zuikaku here really mixed up, because, I mean, it's the same class of ship, but different ships. There is ways to distinguish them, but you have to look close. Oh yeah, they're going after this one. This guy has some engine trouble. His engine's smoking there, or maybe that's a fuel leak or something. Right now you see some pretty limited damage modeling on the aircraft, some bullet holes and engine fires. There it goes. His torpedo, probably a Mark 13. And here, yep, clipped his wing. Yep, hit the water there. I love the look of the splashes in this game. They look really, whoa. They look really misty, so to speak. I guess maybe painterly or artistic would be nice. That's the Zuikaku right there. Anyway, I want to highlight some positive observations that I've seen thus far with this piece of game. Oh, you can see she's just describing a huge circle, which they did in real life. Yeah, again, just the attention to historical details and realistic historical tactics in this game is really impressive. Anyway, the time compression mechanic works pretty well. Even when there's a lot of stuff happening on screen, a lot of aircraft and ships and all that, you can get a good, times 10 time compression on here. It does sort of depend on how much is on the screen, but you can get up to around 40 thereabouts, but even, with all this happening on screen, you can get it up to a comfortable times 10. That's really cool. Furthermore, the ships, the aircraft, the bullets, the shells, they're all running on a physics engine. There is a ballistics engine in this game for the shells and the bullets. There's a flight model for the aircraft. And the ships are, according to the developers, they're actually floating on the water, i.e. they're not gliding on like rails on a glassy, smooth plane, so to speak. So when they take damage, they're going to start listing. They could even theoretically completely sink. I think they're still working on the sinking animations, but if these things take damage, they will list port or starboard. They'll start getting heavier in the bow. Yeah, I mean, in general, I'll just say I'm really impressed with what the developers have accomplished so far with regards to the AI for both the ships and the aircraft. For example, like the Japanese ships, you notice that they break formation and they maneuver wildly under attack. Plus their cruising formation is far more spread out and dispersed compared to the U.S. carrier force, which we'll see in a little bit. Now, in contrast, the American ships, they cruise in formation more closely together, most likely for the purpose of just mutually supporting each other with anti-aircraft fire. And that is kind of one of the things, like, again, anyone who's seen the fairly recent movie Midway, you know, it looks really great, but the ships are way too close in formation when they're sailing and under attack. Like, they would barely have any room to make any maneuvers if they were actually sailing that close. But this one is realistic. All right, we got some dive bombers going in. Oh, there you go. He just released. All right, he hit the port quarter there. All right, let's go to this guy. Bombs away. Nice. Another good couple of hits there. I will also say that the aircraft dogfight in a pretty realistic manner. Now, I'm not an expert on World War II aerial combat, but from what I see, it's very nice and impressive in terms of the AI, in terms of the way they move, their fighting routines and all that. Now, there's a weird graphical glitch right there. There you can see the oil slick trailing behind that carrier. That's something they recently just added in a patch. But yeah, I mean, the escorting fighter aircraft will noticeably dogfight with the enemy fighters and try and get them off the tails of the strike aircraft. While the attack aircraft, they do maintain formation and they support each other with their rear gunners. Now, since the game is heavily focused on carrier aircraft and their tactics, a lot of work has been put into making them behave in a historically realistic manner. So, for example, you'll notice that the torpedo bombers will attempt to make anvil attacks. In other words, they try and attack from two different directions, ideally from both the port and starboard bow of the target. And the dive bombers, furthermore, make their attack runs along the long axis of the ship, ideally. So, yeah, and they go into like a trail formation and into a column formation, follow each other down, as they would have historically. So these are historical, realistic tactics. Now, the key word there is ideal. Okay, obviously in this game, again, just showing how good the programming is. Not every attack in this game is ideal. So aircraft are just going to try and seize the opportunity. The aircraft behave as groups. It's not entirely as a flock, so to speak, of aircraft. They do behave in groups and squadrons. So their AI is programmed that way. And they're not just a bunch of little individuals. So I'm really curious kind of how they did the AI for the aircraft, because it's good so far. It does need a little bit of work here and there, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but anyway, yeah, I mean, not every attack here is ideal, as it wouldn't have been in real life. Another thing is that every anti-aircraft gun down to machine guns are modeled and managed separately. They are grouped into batteries, but the mounts are actually independent of one another. So they can actually all independently pick and engage targets as needed, which is nuts. And man, just seeing these ships just maneuver, trying to dodge the bombs and torpedoes, it's good. Oh man, all those bombs, that guy got lucky. The aircraft and the ships actually have customizable skins, although what I'm showing here is just the default, which looks good, in my opinion. As I mentioned before, the islands on the map are modeled with terrain, but currently there are no buildings. But I think they plan to put those in eventually. So, you know, for example, like on this map, there is Guadalcanal and part of the Solomon Islands chain up to the northeast of the map. And I might show that a little bit later. Now, there are some known glitches thus far, like the game can crash upon exiting the scenario. They do realize, like, you know, there's numerous graphical glitches right now, like the volumetric clouds can sometimes look a little bit weird. Also on wide fields of view, there's like random graphical glitches in terms of details on the aircraft and the ships and stuff. So certain textures or details may go in and out if you change the field of view. There are random sound glitches as well. For example, when you switch to a unit, you can immediately hear like guns firing when there's no guns appearing to fire. And of course, textures and lighting glitches and things like that, not loading properly and losing details at certain camera angles and stuff like that. Again, these are known, so they are aware of this. They are aware of these glitches. It's nothing new. Now, I want to go into this game with the understanding that it still is a ways away from a genuine, fully envisioned product. You know, and even at that, they've got a few months until they got a good playable build here. The basics are there, but there is still work to be done for this game. And every game, every video game, every board game as well, every pen and paper game has bugs and glitches in it. I do not expect a flawless product, but I want to go into this with a critical eye, and I hope that the developers take this criticism as constructive here. And my hopes that I can at least provide some feedback, you know, make them aware of some things, maybe possible ways to improve the experience, make it a better experience. So I'm not into the whole outrage culture or whatever. Oh my god, you know, 0 out of 10, no, we're not playing this again. I'm just so offended. No. Hey, I'm just trying to provide some constructive feedback, right? Now, the planes do occasionally seem to pull off some overly aggressive maneuvers. Again, I'm not an expert in aerial warfare, or I'm not a pilot or anything like that. But like, you know, sometimes they like really overcorrect, or they pull some really ridiculous looking hard G maneuvers and turns. I don't know if the planes would even be physically capable of pulling some of those maneuvers in real life. It looks a little bit weird. I guess in some ways it is understandable. Maybe if the pilots are, you know, it's fairly early in the war, maybe the pilots are still kind of novices. And I'm pretty sure, you know, I think the developers are aware of the limitations of the current artificial intelligence. So in some ways it's understandable. But yeah, occasionally particularly the fighter planes, the way they dogfight, it needs a little bit more polish, I think. It looks very good as it stands, but, you know, just it could be polished up a bit. Alright, well, we're almost done here. Yeah, I think this guy here is RTB, even though he hasn't dropped his ordnance. Yeah, he's headed back home. Another thing I'll see is that there are still occasional some low polygon counts in certain areas of the ship, some low texture details and stuff. Again, part of the textures on some of the aircraft or the ships can look a bit flat. Just blocky textures and looks kind of meh. But again, early build, okay? Early build, work in progress, so. All right, well, that's going to conclude the US part of it. We're just back here on the flag plot. I'm kind of fiddling around with it. Up next, we are going to go and watch the same scenario, but from the Japanese perspective of their strike. Another criticism I have is it would be nice if when you're in the tactical map or the tactical viewer, if you could like double click on units and the camera will focus on them, like snap to them. That would be, you know, I think a good UI decision. The tactical viewer has been directly compared to the sensors manager in the homeworld games. Again, just kind of showing, you know, where they've drawn some of their inspiration in this game from, right? Take a lot of good ideas, right, from other games and try and implement similar things. The tactical map is nice in this game. It shows the immediate area, the immediate battle space, and gives more details in regards to the units compared to the strategic map up there. So you have the world view, which is, you know, the 3D rendering of the world. You have the tactical map. And you have the strategic map right here, which just gives you kind of these broad icons and stuff like that. So, you know, each is, you know, the strategic map is like the 30,000 view, the tactical map is the 15,000 foot view, and the world view is, you know, the boots on the ground view. So I like that. You know, 3 levels of warfare, so to speak. 3 ways to get your information on the game world. But it would be nice if in the tactical viewer, or maybe you can do this now, or maybe not, but if I want to kind of click on these units. Now to switch the camera to any particular unit, you just have to put the mouse pointer on them and double click, and the camera automatically snaps and focuses on that unit. You know, centers on that unit. So it would be nice if in the tactical viewer you could do that. Alright, we got some valves here. You can tell from their fixed undercarriage there. Got some cates beneath us. And again, with the attention to historical detail here, you know, the aircraft markings, the paint schemes and all that, notice how they are different? That's because they come from different carriers and different squadrons. This is realistic, historically accurate to what their paint schemes would have been at this time and based on their squadron. I'm just looking at their torpedoes there. I wonder if they still have the wooden fins that they used during the attack on Pearl Harbor, so the torpedoes don't plunge so deeply into the water. I mean, it wouldn't matter here, we're out in the middle of the ocean, but... Now, the models of the ships in the tactical map are modeled on the old Fletcher Pratt wargame ship models, I believe. Which is kind of a cool little throwback to the old wargaming of, you know, yesteryear, so to speak. Anyway, those are just some of the criticisms that I have currently. And again, I just want to be constructive about it. You know, I'm not saying this is at all bad. It doesn't, none of them make or break it. And I go in with the understanding that this is a work in progress. So I'm just optimistic that they can really improve a lot of this stuff and make it a better product. Now, other things I will mention is that they do plan to fire up a Kickstarter campaign sometime in the winter of 2023-2024. Now, they do want to emphasize that this Kickstarter campaign is not needed in order to finish the game development proper. They already have all the funding they need to actually finish the game as they envision it. The Kickstarter is mostly so they can create like a physical version of the game, like 1990s boxed PC games. You see, back in the day, kids, we had to go out to stores, you know, electronic stores, and buy our computer games. And they came in these big boxes and jewel cases and CDs and all that. So they want to create, you know, an old actual physical version of this game as well. So again, they do not need the Kickstarter to finish the game. They have enough money to do that already. The Kickstarter is for optional things. The other goals for the Kickstarter they could potentially implement, again the keyword there is potentially, not set in stone, but they might later on offer you some direct control of the aircraft and the ships in the game to some degree. Like maybe you can fire the anti-aircraft mounts or do some flying with the aircraft or whatever. Kind of like the Battle Station series, Battle Stations Midway and Battle Stations Pacific. But honestly, I mean, that would be cool, but I'm not expecting a game like the Battle Stations games. I mean, it would be nice, but I mean, My opinion on the Battle Stations series, simply put, is that those were painful for me to play because they were such a farce to history. You know, it's like, the cheesy voice acting, the weird ahistorical stuff that happens in the game, and it was way too arcadey for me to play those games. I didn't really like them. Other possible Kickstarter goals could include like maybe some three-dimensional crew, 3D crew, either static or animated, which would be nice, you know, make the world seem more alive. And they might have some animated victory screens or maybe even extra game modes. So that is what the Kickstarter campaign would envision for some potential goals coming up this winter. And I believe sometime in the winter as well, they are planning to have an actual playable build of the game. As in, like, you can do some, you know, play a quick scenario, control, you know, the American side or something, and play around with that. actually get a feel for what the gameplay is like, other than just watching it like we're doing right now. So that's kind of my current thoughts on this. So I think it has come a long way. There's still work to be done, and I'm very optimistic about what they've done, and what they have done so far is incredibly impressive. And I am just super stoked for this game. Go and wish list this game on Steam. You know, helps people get noticed, and you know, support these developers. They're just a tiny little development team, but they are putting some top-notch work into this thing, I'll say. Not perfect yet, but it has come a real long ways, and what they have is just really great. You know, I mean, the graphics aren't jaw-dropping necessarily. You know, you don't need the top-of-the-line, you know, 4090 graphics card to play this game, but I mean, what they have looks really great. You know, some of the ships look a little bit bland, I say. They could use some more detail, to be honest, but what they have so far looks great. Anyway, well, that's pretty much my my collected thoughts so far. We're just gonna watch, and I'll commentate on what we see happening. This Kate here has got some wildcats on his tail. Oh, he just got shot down, and his torpedo fell off. I don't know if the attack aircraft, the bombers, would be flying in such close formation. I mean, maybe they would. Again, I'm not an expert, but... And, you know, maybe you're wondering, like, oh, why aren't they behaving evasively? Well, because they're lugging around, like, 1,000 pounds of bombs or a 1,000-pound torpedo. Your aircraft is not as maneuverable as if it was just clean, you know? So yes, that torpedo it's carrying is heavy, and it can't pull off these wild, evasive maneuvers, so that's probably why they just kind of continue flying in a straight line. These guys are flying right over that cruiser. Heavy cruiser. And they're going in for an attack. Are they going for the Enterprise or the Hornet? I keep wanting to say Saratoga. No, it's the Enterprise and the Hornet. Also note that the American carrier force puts up a lot more flak. Yeah, they have more anti-aircraft guns. More larger, heavier anti-aircraft guns than the Japanese. The Japanese got that piddly little, 25 millimeter and a handful of 5-inchers. The Americans have a lot more 5-inch guns. Oh, we already got some torpedoes going in on that carrier. I think that's the Hornet. And yeah, she dodged it. I will also say thus far that the sound effects on this game are nice. I really like the sound effects, particularly the boom of the guns firing and the anti-aircraft shells exploding, bursting in midair, all those little black spots. It sounds, she took several torpedo hits right there. But yeah, just the boom, it's a big, bassy boom, and it just sounds powerful. Again, compared to like the Battle Station series where the sound effects sounded so puny, and it's just like... So again, they've added in some of the damage models, the oil slicks here. There's the 1.1-inch Chicago pianos blasting away. An older AA gun that was eventually replaced by the more 20mm and 40mm guns. That's the Hornet. Oh, she's got some holes in her. Look at that. She's got a lot of holes in her. She is taking on water. You can tell the Hornet because her bridge is rounded. The Enterprise is a more squared off bridge. She is listing to starboard, Captain. But anyway, like I was saying, the sound effects in this game sound really good so far. They could use a little bit more work, but they sound pretty good. like I say, in the Battle Stations series, their sound effects sounded puny. It sounded like the sound of guns firing, like a battleship gun firing in Battle Stations. It sounded like someone banging on a metal trash can, you know, and that's how they did their Foley, you know, their sound effects. Ugh, so just wimpy sounding, like this bang, 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 you know. These ones sound like actual big guns firing. I mean, biggest thing they would have on these things is like 5-inchers, you know. Those sound like, you know, good bassy boom. Up, she's got dive bombers. Ooh, that was bad. The Hornet is taking a beating. The Hornet's getting stung, you might say. A lot. By Japanese murder hornets, the Suzumebachi. In fact, the aircraft kind of sound like the Japanese murder hornets, the Asian murder hornets. I know, I lived in Japan, I saw those things, and they're big and they sound like a lawnmower flying at you. Like this. Yeah. If you hear an Asian murder hornet, you know it's coming. It's a deeper, bassier sound to their buzz than a regular honeybee. Anyway. Here we have the USS Enterprise. She's got some fires on her. I was going to make a Star Trek reference, but I'll withhold that for later. And look at the flak going up. Crazy. Yep. Well, looks like, yeah, most of the Japanese are headed home. They're out of here, and just the Wildcats are chasing them away. Yes, the Hornet is listing. Again, just what we have so far, the expansiveness of this game and the way that the scale of the ships and the aircraft and the ocean and the clouds, it looks accurate. You know, sometimes video games aren't the greatest at doing big scales, down from like the tactical level all the way up to like the strategic level. The scaling, the size and all that, it looks off and it looks just exaggerated and weird. This game thus far does not have that problem. Of course, it's a little bit cumbersome if you try and find the planes zooming around in the sky. It's a little bit tough to spot them at times, but yeah. And we got the USS Hughes there, destroyer. Anderson. You can see her torpedoes and her tubes there. I have noticed that the Japanese destroyers don't have any torpedoes loaded in their tubes. The American destroyers do. Of course, the American destroyers probably carry the Mark 15, which is a kind of a bleh. Quite an unreliable torpedo, right? The destroyer surface launch version of the submarine Mark 14. Yes, that torpedo had quite the number of problems. Well, the Enterprise is leaking oil there. She's got a couple fires. The Hornet really took it, though. You, sir, are leaking oil all over the ocean. You got some big holes in your deck. You might need to call the Coast Guard for a tow. They're not going to be happy about all the oil you're spilling into the ocean. Whoa, what happened to the New Orleans here? She's leaking oil. What's going on there? Did she take a hit? Got any holes under her? No, not seeing it. Why is she leaking oil? Ah. Bad oil tanks or something. Astoria's looking okay. Minneapolis. San Fran. Getting a good look at her 5-inch guns there. USS San Francisco, big hero of the first naval battle of Guadalcanal. Among many things, I cannot wait until we see some surface combat. Surface combat will play a pretty big chunk of this game. There's going to be some pretty robust surface combat mechanics in this game, and I am just dying to recreate the naval battles of Guadalcanal, Savo Island, whatever, right? So crazy gunfights, in confined waters in the pitch black. Hopefully the surface combat will be pretty realistic and exciting to watch. I've come up playing Silent Hunter 4 as one of my first major naval simulations, and then the surface combat in that game it's okay for the time. But again, that's a submarine, a World War II submarine simulation, not a surface combat simulator. For example, if you play Silent Hunter 4, one thing I've noticed is I've played it so much that the surface ships, they don't engage each other beyond 10,000 yards. Once they hit 10,000 yards, they'll start shooting at each other. But yeah, from my understanding, the surface combat in this game will be more accurate, more robust. Again, it's not a surface combat simulator, but I think they're going to add in quite a few game mechanics to make it realistic. Simulated radar and all that. And just seeing the oil slicks these ships are trailing. It looks nice. I mean, realistically, the oil slick would be really, really long since she's leaking oil into the ocean. But, again, limitations of the engine, they already had to model the long wakes of these ships, which is impressive that they actually managed to do that. We have part of the Solomon Islands up here. We can go up there to San Isabel. There's the Floridas, Indispensable Strait. Got the Florida Islands right there. Guadalcanal right there in the background. Got the Santa Cruz Islands. I do wonder how much amphibious warfare will play in this game. They have modeled landing craft and some ground troops. Now, I don't think, the mounting an amphibious assault in this game is not going to be a huge component of it, but it might come into play, right? I mean, I don't think you're going to be able to jump into the boots of a Marine and start leading the charge up the beach or anything. No, not at all. But, maybe just sending some landing craft ashore and providing air support from the carriers for those ground operations would be kind of cool. But I think that, again, that will come in time. Perhaps. Maybe. We have different kind of filters here. These LUTs. So we have the default one. We got a sepia toned. Yeah, if you want to do a little newsreel style footage. Yep, just kind of different color gradients. I do like the default one, I will say. Default looks nice. The other ones look good too. Alright. Again, nice looking, very vibrant game. I like the colors. So many games have a bland color palette, looks kind of washed out and blah. You can have that if you want it, but I like the default color scheme. It looks really nice. Well, that is the end of the game, or at least the end of this demo. See how it just automatically pauses there. And we're going back to the flag plot. And that's pretty much my my look at the first demo slice of Task Force Admiral there. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, go to Steam, wishlist the game, get the word out, support the developers. They're working really hard on this. Tiny little team. And yeah, hopefully I'll have some more footage on this a little bit soon. And sometime this winter we're gonna have some actual our first playable gameplay on this. So looking forward to it. I'm super stoked for this game. Anyway, That's it, and have a nice day.